So we all know that the Oppenheimer movie is almost here, and that it's going to be directed by Christopher Nolan. From all the trailers and the featurettes we've got, I think the movie's looking spectacularly good. Not to mention it has one of the most insane Hollywood casts I've ever seen. I also think it's safe to say that he's one of the best film directors out there nowadays, cause I mean, the man gave us the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, Inception, Dunkirk, but there's one special thing about Oppenheimer. Besides being filmed in 70mm IMAX, which is set to revolutionize the way cinema is done, it is the director's very first biographical movie. So in reality, who was Oppenheimer and what was the Manhattan Project? That's what we'll be talking about in this video. Here's what you need to know about Oppenheimer. In 1938, chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann and physicists Lise Meitner and Otto Robert Fisk, working in a laboratory in Berlin, made a discovery that would alter the course of history. That was the discovery of nuclear fission. Basically, they split the uranium atom, and the energy released when this splitting or fission occurred was tremendous, enough to power a bomb. But what is this nuclear fission? Basically, what happens is that when an incident neutron slams into an atom, it forces the atom into the excited state. And excitement is when there's an increase of energy level above a chosen starting point, which could either be the grounded state, which is the minimum level of energy, or sometimes an already excited state, which is more energy than the grounded state. When the atom enters the excited state, it splits into two or more smaller atoms, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. And what generates a chain reaction, as you can see right there, are the additional neutrons that are also released when the splitting occurs. It's also good for you to know that the chain reaction would be an extremely important part of the studies for the creation of the atomic bomb. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does Einstein have anything to do with this? Well, when Professor Albert Einstein learned that the Germans were in the process of building such a weapon, he wrote a letter to former USA President Franklin Roosevelt, telling him that an atomic device was conceivable in 1939. This letter is known as the Einstein-Szilard letter, and that's because the physicist Leo Szilard helped Einstein send the letter to the United States. This same letter was the reason the Manhattan Project was created. Launched in June 18, 1942, it was a scientific and military project to develop the bomb. However, Einstein was not allowed to work on the project, nor were the scientists working on it allowed to consult him. The US Army Intelligence Office had denied him the security clearance needed to work on it, since he was considered a security risk due to him being a left-leaning political activist. Now, here's some things I think are important for you to know. So first, by the time the project was launched, World War II had already started. It actually had its definitive start when the German troops invaded Poland in 1939, which led to France and Great Britain declaring war on Germany. It's also good for you to know that the Japanese Empire, allied to the Axis powers, performed a surprise attack against the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7, 1941. This was of course an important event as it marked the formal entry of the US in the war. Okay, so before I start this section of the video, I just want to say that some info here could be exaggerated, which means they're not 100% accurate to what actually happened. But that won't really be a problem since I'm only focusing on the bigger picture here, so let's get started. Oppenheimer versus Heisenberg. Wait, not this Heisenberg. Okay, so we already know that the US military selected J. Robert Oppenheimer to develop the world's first nuclear bomb. But what I haven't told you yet is that he was in a race against the Axis powers and their top physicist, the world-renowned Werner Heisenberg. While Oppenheimer was the scientific director of the Manhattan Project and is often credited as the father of the atomic bomb, Heisenberg was a German theoretical physicist who won a Nobel Prize in Physics for the creation of quantum mechanics in 1933, making him one of the youngest winners of all time. He's also known for his famous uncertainty principle published in 1927. It's important to note that Werner Heisenberg, like many other young Germans, was a patriot. For this reason, in a gathering of the most renowned physicists of the world in the USA, just before the outbreak of World War II, Heisenberg declined an offer to stay there and work for the Americans, as he considered it a way of walking against his homeland, Germany. Subsequently, he stayed in Nazi Germany, making him one of the most dangerous men in the world at the time, because that meant they now had one of the most brilliant scientists alive working for them. It is sad, on the other hand, that he was never a supporter of the Nazi Party. As the author of The Making of the Atomic Bomb, Richard Rhodes, said, quote, "He was guided by a strong sense of personal duty to the profession and a national loyalty that, in his mind, transcended the particular politics of the regime." End quote. Now here are some important choices for the project. So first, General Leslie Groves was chosen as the head of the Manhattan Project. Then he chose J. Robert Oppenheimer as the project's scientific director. Groves chose Oppenheimer because he thought Robert truly understood what had to be done step by step to achieve the atomic bomb. And then they chose Los Alamos in New Mexico as a site of primary research. Los Alamos was found to be the ideal location for a secret laboratory where some of the most brilliant scientists such as J. Robert Oppenheimer, Richard Feynman, Hans Bethe, and Norris Bradbury, who was director of the secret laboratory, could build nuclear weapons. While working at Los Alamos, Oppenheimer realized that uranium alone would not be enough to build the bombs. So he starts focusing his attention on another radioactive element, plutonium. Unlike uranium, plutonium could be manufactured in a nuclear reactor, but was far more difficult to detonate, and unless they could solve this problem, the bomb would never work. Supposedly, upon hearing rumors of an explosion in Heisenberg's lab, a fear that the Nazis were closer to making the atomic bomb was prevalent in Los Alamos, and the pressure on Oppenheimer had just increased. When Americans had discovered a way to manufacture plutonium for the bomb, Oppenheimer still needed to find a trigger to detonate it. He found himself uninspired and depressed, even considering resigning as director of the project, because he just couldn't see how they were going to be able to use plutonium. But finally, he guessed the answer he needed from previous studies of his about black holes from before the war. He realized that when a star collapses under gravity, it can burst into a supernova and a black hole, so maybe the plutonium should be imploded, reaching critical mass so then it could explode. That was the answer Oppenheimer and all the other scientists at Los Alamos were looking for. In the spring of 1945, things start to go very poorly for Nazi Germany, and eventually Heisenberg, along with Germany's top scientists, is captured by the Allies. But being one of the world's top physicists, he's considered a valuable asset and is sent to a manor house in England, along with other German scientists, of course, so they could find out how much the Germans actually knew about making nuclear weapons. The Allies were relieved to learn that Germany was still years away from making an atomic bomb. Heisenberg ended up returning to Germany since he was never really held responsible for his actions during the war, in an attempt to rebuild the country. As Richard Rhodes also said, even though he had obviously collaborated with the Germans during the war, people had decided that science in Europe had to be restored. And that's how Heisenberg became an international figure of peaceful science, even claiming that he had intentionally hindered his work for the Nazis. By July of 1945, the scientists at Los Alamos eventually have enough material to make 1 uranium bomb and 2 plutonium bombs. However, they were so uncertain about whether the plutonium bomb would work that they had to test one first. The nuclear device in question was nicknamed the Gadget, a massive dark gray sphere with 5,000 pounds of explosives surrounding the plutonium and wired with precision detonators, of course, so that theoretically the implosion method would work perfectly. And to simulate the weapon being dropped from a bomber, the Gadget was lifted onto a 100-feet steel tower, and finally on July 16, 1945, after 3 years of work and over $2 billion spent, it was time to test the bomb. Now here's a curiosity. Some scientists, including Oppenheimer, began to think that the explosion might generate a chain reaction on the Earth's atmosphere, destroying the whole world. And this is mentioned on this scene of the trailer.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want for theory alone?
0 would be nice.
The first nuclear weapon test in history was a success. Thereafter, now that the Americans had made sure that their plutonium bomb worked, it was time for the next step. In only 3 weeks after the test, on August 6, 1945, an American plane was carrying an atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy, which was the uranium bomb, into the city of Hiroshima in Japan, in an effort to end the war once and for all. Former US President Harry Truman made an announcement of this event. He said that what had been done was the greatest achievement of organized science in history. Just 3 days after the Hiroshima bombing, another bomb was dropped in Japan, now in the city of Nagasaki, on August 9, 1945. This time it was a plutonium bomb, codenamed Fat Man. By the end of 1945, the bombing had killed an estimated 140,000 people in Hiroshima and a further 74,000 in Nagasaki. Even more died from the bomb's effects in the following years. And those effects are of course the diseases caused by the radiation, but I'm not really going to talk about radiation because I guess it's a very complicated subject, and if I did talk about it, the video would be much longer. But if y'all want a video on radiation, just comment down below. Woe is me, said Albert Einstein upon hearing the news about the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Basically, it means he was not happy at all. Alright, so here's the difference between the two types of bombs. Little Boy, the uranium bomb, had the gun-type assembly method, in which a conventional chemical explosive activated the combined subcritical pieces of uranium-235, generating the explosion. Fat Man, the plutonium bomb, on the other hand, had the implosion assembly method, in which the explosives surrounding the plutonium core would all activate at the same time, causing it to implode. This plutonium core would reach critical mass to then explode. The term critical mass refers to the smallest mass that can sustain a nuclear reaction at a constant level. A few weeks later, the war finally ended with the Japanese surrender on the battleship Missouri on Tokyo Bay. After the war, Oppenheimer, being dubbed the father of the atomic bomb, became some sort of pariah, an outcast in society. Besides, he was haunted by the visions of the destruction the bombs had caused, the many lives that had been taken, and even worse, the threat that the weapons now posed the entire world. The way I see it, Oppenheimer was blinded by the dream of making his mark on the world, and didn't really think about the consequences of his actions. Richard Rhodes, author of The Making of the Atomic Bomb, said that even though these weapons killed an enormous amount of human beings, it is true that they put an end to world-scale war probably forever, and according to him, that is the dilemma of the atomic bomb. I'm really excited to go see the movie. What about you? Anyway, I hope we all have a great time in theaters. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.